Okay, we're recording. Thank you.
Very nice of you to come to talk to our students again. And I already told them about your being a very engaging, funny speaker. I'm sure they will enjoy. We, okay, I will let you start um, to tell more about your
Okay,
career.
thanks, Enla. Hi, everyone. So sorry about the technical difficulties this morning. My the Zoom appointment said I needed a commercial Zoom account, and although Ascension has a commercial Zoom account, it wasn't letting me log in. So that is why. And we are a Google shop at Ascension, so fortunately, we were able to default to Google. And thank you all for your flexibility and being able to jump over to the Google appointment. So my name is Lisa.Sturm. Yes, Sturm rhymes with germ. It's totally awesome that I married somebody with that name. I am a U of M School of Public Health graduate, 1992. I was the first graduating class from U of M SPH in the Hospital and Molecular Epidemiology program in 1992. It started in 1990. At the time, they did not have any hospital epi courses or speakers or professors. It was all molecular epi. So I learned a lot about that, but very little about infection prevention. I just um, got exposed to infection prevention when I was a nuclear medicine technician at a hospital, Beaumont Hospital in Royal Oak, Michigan. And the lady came from that department to teach us about OSHA bloodborne pathogens. This was in the 80s, 1980s. And I thought, wow, that looks like a really cool profession because it seemed to marry everything I loved, and it had a little bit of excitement and sleuth to it as well, which is always fun. So I pursued my PH and eventually got a job in infection prevention and have been doing it for almost 30 years now. And I'll tell you, every single year brings something new and exciting, and hopefully I can give you some tips and tools if you are slightly interested or maybe really interested in getting into this profession. I'll expose you to some ideas, suggestions, recommendations. This is all just based on my experiences. So none of this is from the literature or research. This is Lisa.Sturm coming to you live with tales from the front. And for whatever it's worth, you can use my advice and see if you can pursue a career in this. So just starting out our titles, there's a lot of different titles. So the actual Department of Labor, the federal government Department of Labor, does not have a title profession, infection preventionist. We, the national organization APIC, which I'm a part of, we are working on this to get them to recognize the actual job description or code. But right now there isn't one. So you cannot find it in any like OSHA register or anything like that. So we are called a number of different things. It's totally based on what the hospital or health system or entity wants to call you. So IP is kind of the leading term, infection preventionist, but you might be still hear references to infection control practitioner, infection control coordinator, clinical infection preventionist, or even epidemiologist. Salary ranges right now, this is based on what we are paying our infection preventionists at Ascension. So I lead an infection prevention program that has about 180 infection preventionists working at Ascension across the country. This is about our salary range, depending on experience and degree. So there's also some entry-level roles in infection prevention. These people are either called analysts or data assistants, surveillance assistants, and they make a little bit less, of course. But those roles are good if you're looking to maybe break into the job and want to see if you even like it or get a little experience. They're not as plentiful, and a lot of hospitals don't have those roles, but some do. So if you bump into something like that, it is a good entry level. Which is not to say you can't just jump into an infection prevention role out of your program. You can, but if you are struggling, you could look at a lower level job. There's also you know, a lot of administrative advancement opportunities in the field. So you could go to lead infection preventionist, they make a little more money, project manager, supervisor, manager, director, senior director, all the way up to vice president. Some across the country, we have some infection prevention vice presidents. And then, of course, you know, the pay is about there. I mean, this I was just kind of sort of guessing based on what I make, what I know others make in these job titles. So it's not like, you know, based on any website or salary.com or anything like that. This is based on my personal knowledge. And then, of course, if you get a medical degree, like an MD or a DO, then that's, you could become a hospital epidemiologist, which that makes like a physician salary. So it is a young field. Infection prevention has not been around forever, although infection prevention was practiced in, you know, different ways, whether it's Lister or Semmelweis. You know, there's hand hygiene and antisepsis and all that has been around forever, but the field itself started in the 70s. So, you know, it was mostly just laboratorians that had access to the microbiology reports. Eventually, it became the nurses out on the units, typically a nurse with a bad back, maybe that needed like a desk assignment. But now it's a wonderful blend of different people. It's nurses, it's allied health. You know, I said I was a nuclear medicine technologist. It's MPH grads like you all going to be. It's also other types of master's graduates, community health graduates, things like that. As far as where you can get a job, well, you know, COVID really helped expand our opportunities. So you can get jobs in infection prevention pretty much wherever there is a need to prevent the spread of infections. So, of course, the hospital setting, long-term care, ambulatory settings, rehab, behavioral health, jails, prisons, public health departments, county public health, state public health, CDC. So there's all entities of public health. And then, of course, vendors and manufacturers and industry is hiring. They hire infection preventionists now as well. And even the newest one, I just lost an IP lead to a software company that sells infection prevention software. So opportunities are expanding and quite endless. So let's talk about, you know, where you're sitting right now. And if you're thinking like, wow, this might be something I'm interested in, you know, what can you do to learn a little bit more about it? The best probably universal web source to learn about infection prevention is EPIC.org. EPIC is our national organization for infection prevention. It's really 100% focused on infection prevention. So that stands for the Association for Professionals in Infection Control and Epidemiology. So APIC.org, I'm a national chair of a national organization with APIC, the Public Policy Committee, where we try to leverage and influence legislation and regulatory around infection prevention with our legislators in Washington, D.C. So I'm very active with APIC, and I put MSIPC there. That organization was a local Michigan organization that has since been sunsetted. So don't look for the MSIPC website. That little organization went out of business, if you will. But APIC.org, they have all kinds of resources there. In fact, there's actually a video somewhere on that website of me doing this lecture because they are trying to get the message out about infection prevention to students just like you. We're trying to grow the field. We're trying to expand. There's a job shortage, as you probably know, in healthcare, but in infection prevention as well. Good qualified candidates are really hard to come by. So we're trying to recruit and, of course, retain who we have. So that's one place you should go and do some research. APIC also, you can become a national member. It's kind of expensive. I think it's about $200. But then through that national membership, you can join a chapter. In every state has chapters. And that's how I actually got started, was by joining, when I was a student at U of M, I joined the National APIC organization, and then I joined the APIC Great Lakes chapter, which generally meets in like the Detroit and surrounding areas. But that's how you can kind of like really ingratiate yourself to other people in the community that are working already in infection prevention and network. So you can read about infection prevention products, just basically, learn about the profession and what it's all about. There's different organizations that have pulled together formally or informally that work on infection prevention. There's a corporate IP network that I was a part of that actually APIC just absorbed. That's just large infection prevention leaders like me that have come together to network, programs, conferences, things like that. The CHIP internship through U of M School of Public Health is a very, very successful program. I actually, when I was at U of M as the director, I was the pilot site many, many years ago for that internship. We took two or three U of M SPH students and kind of piloted what that was going to look like through a formal internship program. And it's grown ever since. It's really successful. I know they're coveted positions, and I'm at Ascension, we usually take 1 or 2 CHIP interns every year for our Michigan market. And we do look for, when we go through those applications, we do look for people that want to carve out a career in infection prevention. So if that is your fancy, I definitely recommend pursuing one of those internship spots. You can also look for other things, though. There's research opportunities. You can even just try to get a job in infection control department. They hire, secretaries, assistants, things like that. Volunteering is great work, to get your feet wet in infection prevention. During COVID, there was lots of volunteer opportunities. You could be a contact tracer for the state of Michigan, participate in vaccination fairs or anything like that. So basically, just try to expose yourself as you would in any career opportunity to what the people in that field do for a living. You could ask to shadow infection preventionists. It's funny because sometimes I get people to ask to shadow me. Well, most of my time is in my home office here, but there's most infection preventionists do not work full time in a home office like me. So there's that. Also, if you are non-clinical, you don't have any clinical experience, but you want to get some exposure, it would behoove you to maybe try to volunteer in a hospital or a nursing home just to be around a healthcare setting to even see if that even appeals to you, because most infection preventionists do work, like I said, in a clinical setting. So you might find you don't like that, and that would be important to know before you try to get a job in infection prevention. Of course, your capstone or your EPID680 if you can do it, infection prevention. When I was in your chair, there were no opportunities for me to do that, but my friend, my student friend, she did get her EPID680 over at the U of M infection control department, infection prevention department. So I just joined her as I was like her assistant. It was kind of funny, but it helped because it got me exposed to the people there and what the work was. And so it helped, and it built my resume. So you do have to start thinking about building your resume and your profile. If you do want to be in this field, you do have to start showing some track record, if you will, on your resume of what it means to of that you really have an interest in this. You just don't want to come out and just have no kind of evidence. You need just a breadcrumb trail. So if you're nearing graduation, you should keep doing all these things, but I would definitely recommend, if you really now have an interest and this is kind of your direction, you should start to join those professional organizations so you can start to really get in there, dig in deeper, and start to get to know people and names and challenges within the field and things like that. Do your research. Where do you want to work? There's jobs in every corner of the world for infection prevention, and you need to start thinking about where you want to land after you graduate. And then start networking and calling people, connect with headhunters. A Galileo Search, I'm not promoting them, but they do seem to be a headhunter company that does seem to specialize in infection prevention jobs. So you can look them up. They're always looking for IPs. IPs are really in demand. So during the pandemic, we were paying $200 an hour for IPs from the temp agency. So they were a hot commodity. That was like what the nurses were making in the ICUs. So you can, most large health systems, you can go into their job board site and set up keyword job alerts, so you can get emailed when a job with those words pop up in a job description. So that's a good idea. Share your CV and tell people you're interested in opportunities, but don't be like a stalker. I've had stalkers over the years, and that can be really like offensive. So don't, one and done type of thing. Don't keep pounding people. It's okay. So I'll give you an example. Say you want to move to San Diego after you graduate, and you find out you can connect with me for names of people. I know pretty much every large health systems infection prevention manager, director, and you can say, hey, Lisa, I am thinking after I graduate, I want to land in San Diego. Can you hook me up with the infection prevention people in San Diego? And I can give you a contact. And then you can email said contact with your CV, and you can name drop and say I was in Lisa's lecture, whatever. And then they would like write back and say, we don't have a job opportunity, but I'll keep your CV on file. Or, oh, it just so happens I'm working on filling a position right now. We'll put you in the queue. So but then like that's it. Like leave it alone. Like don't go, nutso on it. So, but that's just an example. But I have had people over the years that somebody has given them my name, and like every 3 months they're like, pinging me, and I'm like, whoa, take a chill pill. Okay, so let's talk about your resume and your CV. This is really important, right? This is your, the first thing people are going to see about you, aside from maybe if you send them an email. But so let's talk about that. It's really, really important. So recognize your assets and don't sell yourself short. So when you're going to go into a potential job opportunity for infection prevention, your competition might be a clinical nurse, it might be an ICU nurse, it might be an experienced infection preventionist, it might be a microbiologist from the hospital lab. You never know what it's going to be, right? So you have to like really go in very confident that you are coming in with a certain skill set, a certain background, a certain training. And don't ever sell yourself short. Like I've interviewed MPH grads, and they're like, well, I don't have any clinicals, so how am I'm never going to get this job over like, Betty Sue, the ICU nurse. And I'm like, well, that's not true. You don't know what they're looking for. You don't know, maybe they already have 5 Betty Sues, right? And they need somebody like you. So never, ever, ever underestimate what you're coming out of this School of Public Health with and what you can bring to the table. You have to be very, very solid on that. Now, a resume should highlight your strengths, but not be overly fluffy, and flowery. This is personal. I've looked at, thousands of resumes over the years. I always look for schooling and job experience. Those are my 2 big things. I hate it when like the first page is just a bunch of adjectives of how your mother would describe you, like a strong team member, hardworking, honest, loyal, confident. Yeah, right. So let's just, cut the fluff and put the meat on your page 1, because sometimes that's all a person or an HR person is going to look at, might be page 1. So make sure, I can't stress this enough, you guys, that it is professional and typed professionally, no typos, grammars. Have other people look at it for you, because there might be a typo in there that you just gloss over. Have more than one other person take a look at it and just make sure it's clean, it's formatted, it looks like nice, it makes sense, it's not too wordy, but it's wordy enough to give a little bit of meat about you. And then in your cover letter, try to draw, you really like read the job description. And unfortunately, job descriptions are getting more and more generic. in the past, they used to be a little bit more granular about what the job entailed, but now they have like these almost canned job descriptions that tell you very little about the job. And that doesn't help you, because I've always told people to use those little cues and clues in those job descriptions to write your cover letter and extract out 1 or 2 key things that they are looking for and put it in your cover letter. So it's like a match, right? Like, ooh, winner, winner, chicken dinner. So still try to do that as best you can. It depends, like I said, on the job description. If it's super, super cut and paste, you may not have that ability. Now, your cover letter, don't make it like, size 8 font, like expanded margins with like 1 trillion words on it. Like that is just, nobody's going to read any of that. Keep it short, keep it to the point, really hit on what you want them to know about you. And like I said, people are reading, sometimes for a job opening, you might have 200 applicants. So you don't have a ton of time to you're really flying through these things. So you got to keep it really what you want them to know and no baloney fluff in there. Now, what I've always looked for, I do look at what college the person went to. I mean, it's not to say that I'd be like, oh, they went to Michigan State, I'm not interviewing them. Oh, they went to U of M, I am. I'm not like that. But like, I have to have some knowledge of the university or the institution. And I don't look at GPAs. In the past, sometimes candidates would put their GPA on their resume. I once interviewed somebody that had like a 2.2 or something. And I didn't find that on the resume, but it was somewhere in the HR job application. But so I don't, put a lot of weight on GPAs. You can always tell somebody's level of intelligence and critical thinking when you interview them. Resumes too, I do look for gaps and holes, or what we call red flags. So, job hoppers can be concerning red flags, like, you're younger probably, so you don't have a ton of this going on yet. You haven't probably established this long running record of job hopping, but as you gain experience, if you it's okay in the beginning to maybe have a little bit of like job hopping, but eventually you should start showing some length of time at the positions. Otherwise, if as a hiring manager, I start to think, well, hiring somebody is a great investment, right? The whole process is expensive, and then training them and onboarding them and et cetera. So when you hire somebody, you want them to stay with you a while, not like 6 months or a year. And if they're just like flitting around, that to me, there's always been a red flag. So if you do have that going on, or you do have long gaps on your resume, or you've never worked, that's okay, but you should probably try to have some volunteer experience or some other explanation. Well, I was in the Peace Corps for 3 years, and that's why I have this gap here. So it's like I said, it's okay to have those, but try to have like a laudable explanation. I interviewed a gal once who had a 10-year gap on her resume, a microbiologist, and then I said, oh, what were you doing in this 10-year gap? Not like drilling into like personal, but she was like, oh, well, I what did she say? I was a stay-at-home mom, something like that, And then at the end, we were chit-chatting, and it came up. I was talking about my kids, and she's like, oh, I don't have any kids. And I was like, oh, well, how are you a stay-at-home mom? It turned out she was just managing some renovations on her house, which is fine, but like, don't lie, So anyways, just, have an explanation. Okay, let's talk about the interview. There is one more thing I added to this section that I didn't put on the handout, but I think it's important, so I'll mention it. So first of all, preparing for the interview, I really think it's helpful if you can do a mock interview, especially if you don't have a lot of interviewing experience. So if you can and if you know somebody in your friend or family circle that is a hiring manager, for what, it doesn't matter like what profession, just somebody with those skills of being a hiring manager, I think it's a great idea to try to do a mock interview with them. I offer my friends and family, my nieces, my nephews, mock interviews all the time. And I always have them send me their CV and resume in advance so I can take a look at it and frame my questions. I send them like a fake job description, or they send me the job description of the job they're going for. And then we just do it. We've done them in person, we've done them remote or, virtual. I think it helps get sometimes, if you have any jitters, it can help work those through. But also, if they're an experienced hiring manager, they can ask you those maybe curveball questions that you might not be prepared for, that maybe they use when they interview people. And I think it helps you. I've gotten feedback from people I've done that through, that those mock interviews really help them. So I didn't put that here, but I'm going to add it after, but I definitely recommend that. So research the institution. It's good to know about the place that you maybe want to get a job with, right? So, what is their situation? You can get so much information on the internet now. So what's the situation? What's their financial situation? If it's a health system, are they growing? Are they shrinking? What's going on there? Are they shifting their focus from acute to ambulatory, or ambulatory to surgery, or whatever? So are they potentially on the chopping block? Are they maybe folding, or are they being acquired by somebody else, right? Look what happened in Michigan with Beaumont and Spectrum and now Corewell Health, and they're letting people go. Those kind of dynamics are important to know, just to keep in the back of your brain for the interview. It's not necessarily, bring it up on the interview like, hey, I heard you guys are cutting positions, so, but just have that like knowledge, working knowledge. Research the profession and the position itself. I remember when I was a student, undergrad, and I wanted to become a nuclear medicine technologist, and I was interviewing for the student school position at that health system. They're like, well, what do you think a nuclear med tech does, Lisa? And I didn't know, because I was 19 years old. I didn't research. I just picked it because I thought, oh, it sounds cool. I'm like, well, I think like they do like barium enemas and stuff. And they're like, no, that's an X-ray tech. And then I was really like, oh, I probably should have researched that in advance, know what I'm going for. So anyways, do that, and then prepare intelligent questions. So I would say, like, read up on some challenges in the field right now. Like right now in infection prevention, I have a question for you guys, and I want to know, do any of you know, what do you think are the top 2 challenges right now in infection prevention? Put it in the chat box. There's that little box, comment box. You can click on that. And what do you think are the top, like, there is a huge new challenge right now in infection prevention. It's emerging. It came out of COVID. We're all struggling, right? Ellie, good guess. Antibiotic resistance. You are on the right track. Any other guesses? Not that I have a prize. Vaccination. That is a good one, Allison. That's not a huge thing. Funding, yes, Chris, that's always a problem. HAIs, yes, Ivy, that's our life. There's a specific emerging pathogen that is actually a really big problem in Michigan right now. Yes, Stephen, winner, chicken dinner. Candida auris is I'm telling you, you guys, this is the next explosion problem. C. auris. C. auris is a highly resistant strain of Candida that is mostly colonizing patients, but it is like coming out fast and strong. It spreads like nobody's business. It is running like wildfire through our nursing homes, and it's now, because right, there's crossover, it's now hitting the hospitals. So things like that, that's what I would recommend you look up before your interview. And then you can, like, without going too crazy, frame like an intelligent question around that in your interview. So for example, if you knew that, you could say, if you were interviewing with me, you could say, oh, is Ascension, at the end when there's open questions, you can say, I understand Candida auris is a huge new challenge in infection prevention. How is Ascension dealing with that? Or something like that, so you don't want to go like so detailed that you're going to make the person interviewing you feel stupid, or you're not like to like stump them. But all the other things you guys put in the chat box are really good discussion points too. Funding, healthcare acquired infections, antibiotic resistance. Those are all really good things that you could also drive a question around. So don't feel like you have to have like the one thing, but do, some research. Read the, like I said, read the job description carefully. That used to be more possible in the past. Now it's getting a little bit more generic, especially as health systems merge and become bigger and bigger, you guys. Things are becoming a little less personal because, at Ascension we have 100, and on any given day, 142 to 153 hospitals. It's always changing. So, when you're dealing with that many hospitals, things do become a little bit more diluted and generic at the system level. So now research the person interviewing you. Okay, so not the HR. So a lot of times now, especially with these larger places, you're going to have a screening interview with HR. The HR screening interview is more just to see, do you fit the minimum requirements? Like, I've had construction workers apply for infection prevention jobs. So that's to more screen out the big filter, right? And then they would kick their resume over to you. Now, there's been times where HR, I tell them, I want to see all the resumes, not the ones just that you filtered out. Because a couple times I've caught things where they filtered somebody out and I wanted to interview them. So that, that could be the case too. So you can look up people, Google them on LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. So, remember on LinkedIn, people can, especially if the premium account, they can see who's looking up their profile. But to be perfectly honest, that's okay. I get probably 60, 70 profile looks on me, every time I get a LinkedIn report. I don't care. Do I really care that you looked at me? No, LinkedIn is the professional platform to do that. So it's okay. So Facebook, the nice thing is they don't know, you're looking them up on Facebook. Same with, I think, the other platforms, Instagram and TikTok. I've been using TikTok lately to look people up. So you could call it stalking, but I'm going to tell you what, I'm doing the reverse stalking on you too. So it cuts both ways, right? So if you're, applying for a job with me, I'm going to be looking up you on social media as well. Especially if I'm getting close to offering you a job, I want to know that, you're not some weirdo that, your profile picture is you holding a, AK-47 aimed at puppies or something. So just remember that. Okay, so when you're setting up an interview, whoever you're setting up, now it's probably a lot online setting up. But if you're actually on the phone with somebody, remember the person you're talking to could be sitting right next to the person that's interviewing you. I had a candidate that when I worked at U of M, she was so difficult to my secretary about where was she going to park? Were we going to pay her for parking? I had another one that was coming in from Texas. She wanted to know if we were going to pay for her airfare. She was so rude and mean to my secretary. Those were red flags. If you can't even get along with the support person, how am I going to ever predict that you're going to get along with my whole team? Right? I had 17 people at U of M. I have a big team. So it's really important that you treat everybody with respect and kindness, and you're very accommodating. Don't ask about reimbursement for parking or anything like that. Don't sound cocky, arrogant, all those yucky things. Try to build a rapport, be nice. I've always done that. Right? These are people that it's okay to be nice, and I wouldn't say bring them chocolates and flowers, but you could bring me chocolates. Just kidding. Be flexible with your scheduling. That was another thing. This one girl, she was so inflexible with her scheduling for the interview. My secretary would come and complain to me all the time about it. And I was like, how is that possible? You have to accommodate. Everybody's really busy. So try to be flexible. Ask about parking in advance. You don't want to have any last minute surprises or be late for your interview because you didn't know where to park, or you didn't have I went to Michigan State once for a big meeting, and I don't remember. I was trying to park in the parking structure, and either it only took cash or it only took a card, but I didn't have one or the other, and I was late for the meeting, and it was just a hot mess. So just check that all out in advance. Take a test run, in fact. Now, I have a funny story about a test run, you guys. So I set up an interview with a candidate that I had stalked appropriately in advance, so I knew what he looked like. I'd seen him on social media. And the day before the interview, we were at U of M. Our offices were a dead-end hall. This is one hall. You got to the end. There was a stairwell. You had to go back. So I see this guy, and the interview room was right across from my office. This guy walking back and forth down the hall, because he'd get to the end of the hall and he'd get, turned around. And I looked out and I was like, oh my God, that's the candidate I'm interviewing tomorrow. And it was the next day when I saw him. I was like, were you walking up and down my hall yesterday? He's like, yeah, that was me. I was like, okay. Now, funny story about that candidate as well, you guys. And this is very true in interviews. A lot of times you'll interview, you'll go through a series of interviews, right? But sometimes it will end with a team interview. So I'd interviewed that guy and he did great, swimmingly great, super interview, right? And so I advanced him to get a team interview, follow up with the team. And when they interviewed him, it was a completely different situation. At the whole interview, he bragged about how he was president of his frat house's beer pong committee or something with beer pong, and did not talk anything about his skills, his training, his education, nothing. It was all about his partying. And I think he was trying to be friends with them, but they were all very put off by it. And their feedback on him was do not hire. So he did not get hired. So just remember, be consistent, try to, toe the party line in all the different interviews, and don't completely change who you are. And brag about your beer pong committee role. All right, the interview itself. So things are changing now because of the remote thing. So let's talk about remote interviews first, because I have interviewed a number of people now because of COVID, through remote. So, your background, it's okay. You can see my background, right? I've got doll houses, I've got a couch and a cat and all these things, right? And that's fine. To have that background is fine. Some no-nos though. So if you are taking an interview from your bedroom, which is not uncommon, because if you live in an apartment, you might that's it. That's the only place you can get to close the door. Make sure your bed is made. I cannot tell you how many times I've been on calls, even at Ascension, with high-level professionals, and for whatever reason, they're taking a call from their bedroom, and their bed is in the background, and it's a mess. And it's could you not at least have made your bed? So that's number one. The other thing is you might not want yucky things in the background. I was on a meeting recently with a guy at Ascension, and his cat litter box was right behind him. And every so often the cat would come in and do its business. And I was like, really? You couldn't move the cat litter box? So just try to be aware of what's behind you, but it doesn't have to be picture perfect. Now, the other thing about those artificial backgrounds that you can bring up, those are great, but be aware too, when you move, you might disappear out of the background. And sometimes I've seen them do funny things to be it'll cut off your hair and make you look like you have a halo or you're bald or something. So just beware, if you're going to use an artificial background, you can't really move around. And you can see I move around a lot, so that's why I don't use them. But also, it might do funny things to you. Yeah. Another funny one. I was on a call with somebody, and they were in a room with a ceiling fan, but the way their head was just positioned with the ceiling fan, it looked like the ceiling fan was sitting on top of their head and it was spinning. So it looked like they had one of those hats on with spinning. Finally, I said, Marcus, I have to stop this call. There is a spinning thing on your. So just maybe even do if you do your mock interview with somebody, do it in the space you're going to do. And try not to do an interview in a public place or an airport or something like that. Use your common sense. Also, remote does not mean casual, right? So we've all heard those funny stories from the waist down. You could be in shorts. Just remember, you might you might have to like leave for what, like maybe something falls off the wall and you have to say, excuse me. You do want to be dressed head to toe in something that would be seen, by others. You don't want to, be in shorts or your whatever. And then dogs and kids and cats. They're all very cute. We all have them, right? But it's like, I think I've been on calls with people, like they think it's cute to have their baby in their lap or their cat in front of them, and try to avoid that. Like your cat might jump up, get rid of it, right? Your dog might, and make sure your dog, if you have dogs, they're secure. Like I have 2 dogs, 2 huskies that bark. They're secure right now because I don't want them like barking and interrupting us. So just like distractions and stuff like that, try to keep to a minimum. Okay, so moving on. Okay, it's dress professionally. You're not a student anymore, right? You don't have to be like full formal, but moderation is best. I mean, I say overly trendy. It's okay to have colorful and fun clothes, but don't be like really crazy out there. I've interviewed candidates from MPH. Even this applies to your CHIP internship too. I interviewed a girl a couple of years ago, and she showed up in this like micro mini dress, like mini tubey skirt thingy. And I was like, really? Like, I don't want to be seeing that. Like, so use moderation. Don't smell. No body odor, no smelly hair products, because the person interviewing you is also assessing, consciously or subconsciously, is this somebody I can see in my team, right? Is this somebody I can see? Unless you're 100% remote, I'm not going to hire somebody that doesn't smell good. The people have to like work with you and be with you sometimes long hours. So most health systems are fragrance free now, so you have to keep the cologne and smelly hair products to a minimum. Moderate makeup. I mean, if you do your eyes fun ways or whatever, that's fine, but like don't be like crazy about it. Tats and piercings are fine, but moderation. Health systems in general are more conservative health settings. Jails and prisons, if you're going for a job there, is probably a little bit more leeway. So just know what is kind of acceptable in that setting and match that in your interview. Bring questions to ask, like even if it's just a few. I hate it when I'm interviewing somebody and you're at the end and you say, do you have any questions for me about the job? And they're like, no. You don't want to have that like deadpan. You want to have like some enthusiasm, and questions show interest and enthusiasm. Make sure that, you're not just looking for a job. Like, I'm just going through the motions and I just need a paycheck. This is like a thing for you. This is your passion. This is where you want to go. So sound interested, take notes. Obviously try to be as relaxed as possible. That's, pretty rhetorical, but it's okay to be nervous, especially if you're not, advanced at this. It's okay. People interviewing you should understand that. I've interviewed hundreds of people that are nervous, and that's perfectly acceptable. I've even interviewed people that like dripped sweat in person interviews, and I understand. We're human. Take extra copies of your cover letter and your resume, because you never know if more than one person is going to be interviewing you. So you need to, if it's an in-person, you need to be prepared for that. After the interview, obviously it's remote, it's a moot point, but if in person, you can say, do you have a business card? Or, if you get little cards from U of M or make your own, bring those, share those. It never hurts to have just that little calling card that, they can throw on their desk. They might forget, and then, oh, there it is. It's just a little reminder. If it's in person, don't change the environment or the seating. I interviewed a guy once who, before I got into the room, he changed the whole room. He like opened the window, he moved the chairs. I was like, really, dude? Like, why are you doing that? This is not, you're a guest basically in somebody's home. So, think of it that way. As far as they generally in person, they'll offer you maybe, drink of water or something. It's fine. But don't, like, if you're so like scattered and nervous, don't take it if you think you're going to spill it. Go to the bathroom in advance, get that taken care of. Show up 15 minutes earlier, but no earlier than that, because if you show up too early, especially if they're doing like succession of candidates, you could be bumping into the other candidates, and that's super awkward. So don't try to name drop. I've had this happen a number of times, and I hate it. It's okay to name drop, like, let's say you're interviewing at Corewell Health, Beaumont Spectrum, and you know me. It's okay to be like, oh, Lisa Sturm gave me your number. But don't be like, oh, my dad is president of blah, 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 and all the surgeons at this hospital do business with him, blah, blah. So kind of like, quid pro quo. Like, don't do that. That's like that's really, to me, very offensive. In fact, I had an employee that used to do that to me all the time. Her dad had some connection, and I had to sit her down and like tell her, like, you need to stop. She even had a surgeon email me to get her promoted. And I'm like, if you don't stop this, like, you're out of here. And it didn't end well. So don't do that. It's okay, like I said, to name drop within the profession, though, right? During the interview, show your strengths. You are the bee's knees. You're graduating with a U of M School of Public Health MPH degree. This is awesome. You have to really, really highlight it. Stress whatever skills you've hopefully built up to this point. Try to figure out who your competition is. A lot of times, like, some larger infection prevention programs, they'll have their teams like on their website, like who else is on the team. Like Johns Hopkins, you can look up their entire team right now, who works, what their jobs are, what their backgrounds are. So if that's the situation, you could do a little bit of research about the department. It's okay to ask, who would I be reporting to in this position? It might be the person interviewing you, it might not. So it's okay to ask that. Take samples of your work if you have samples, maybe from your capstone or from a research or volunteer project. Always take, samples, or have them available if it's a remote or an online interview. Like I said, try to listen for keywords from the job description and try to exploit that to your benefit. And then remember it for later too, because I want you to weave that into your thank you note. So you're building, like, you're planting little seeds, because really at the end of the day, the person interviewing you is looking like, who's best for this job, right? And they might have a certain thing in mind, and you might just hit on that certain thing. I've interviewed people based on that. So it's okay to bring along references, but don't offer them unless asked for, because generally, the way I always rolled was I would interview a bunch of people, and then I would only ask for references from like my top 2 choices, because that means, you're going to take it one step further and call on references. Now, there's been a new trend, and I think it's because of COVID and the rapidity of having to fill positions. A lot of times people aren't even checking references anymore, which I find shocking. But the last couple of IPs we've hired at Ascension, I was told by the hiring managers, they didn't even check the references. And I was like, eeks. But sometimes references, it's kittens and cupcakes, so they're not helpful anyways. It's okay to ask, what the timeline is for filling the position. Sometimes they're interviewing and they don't even have the position like funded yet, or it's a grant position. So, it's okay to say, what is the timeline? Because you need to know, right? Once you graduate, you might have student loans piling up. So it's okay to know, you're planning your timeline. It's okay to say, is there the possibility that there's going to be subsequent interviews after today? Don't assume you're going to get one, because like I said, I would only advance people through those levels if I thought they were qualified to go forward. Not everybody got a team interview, or et cetera. What I always looked for was energy, enthusiasm. Now, look, I know some of you might be introverts, right? Or maybe not have that like personality. That's okay, but you can still show energy and enthusiasm. My daughter is an introvert, and but I can still tell when she has enthusiasm about something, even as an introvert. So try to have that sparkle about the position, even if you're not just generally like that in general. Try to show that excitement about the position, no matter what it is, right? You got to figure that nobody wants like that dead fish on their team. And then, how are you different, and what do you bring to this team? What is special about you? There's got to be something special about you. And it's really important to bring that up, because especially if you're interviewing like 20 people, when you go to hire, you're trying to think who stood out, right? Who grabbed my attention? After the interview, send a quick follow-up note. Email is fine, but handwritten is always special too. Try to weave into that thank you note what those keywords were, those little buzzwords. And like I wanted to mention, sometimes in the I said in the job description, there's no keyword or buzzword for you to like glob onto. But oftentimes, if you get the interview, there will be something. And, they might mention, we're looking for somebody with a skill or talent here. And then you're going to try to figure out, how do you have said skill or talent? And, it's like a puzzle piece. So just to continue that theme, put that skill or talent in your thank you note. And I did this. One guy I hired at U of M who's still there, he was really apt at doing this when I was losing my infection prevention analyst that ran my Theradoc, which was our infection surveillance software. And he was like amazing. And I was so sad I was losing him. And so I kept bringing that up in the interview with this new guy, and he caught on to it. And in his little thank you note, he put that. And I was like, winner, winner, chicken dinner. And I hired him, and he's very successful. So that is just a little tip. Don't stalk the person. This goes back to the earlier thing, like one thank you is enough. Like you don't have to keep bugging them. If they've interviewed you, they have everything they need, right? They've got your contact information. They know how to find you. Don't send repeated, you want to look enthusiastic and energetic and interested, but you don't want to appear like too crazy, desperate, or stalky. I've had people stalk me, and it's not fun. Okay, don't be surprised if it takes a while. Like, the interview process and the whole job hiring process, it can take months. And sometimes the bigger the place, the longer. So things move slow. And then, you know what? If you didn't get the job, it's okay. There's going to be more interviews. There's more opportunities. It's like there's more fish in the sea, right? But try to learn at least from the experience. Why? Try to do a root cause analysis. Why didn't I get it? Now, maybe it was just a bad, you completely weren't even close, but that's fine. You could call, if you really, really are like stumped, you could call the person who interviewed you and ask for feedback. You could also ask, or this could be an email, would I be considered for a future? Was it just maybe the poor job fit for now, but maybe for the future? And I've had people email me, what can I do to better position myself to get a future with you, a job with you in the future? And I would be honest. I had a gal do that. I interviewed her, and she didn't get the job, and she was an internal candidate. She was coming from the microbiology lab at U of M. And she did ask me for feedback. And I actually met with her for 45 minutes. And gave her feedback and told her, this is where you probably could have excelled or done a little different or better. So it depends on the person that interviewed you, if they're going to be willing to do that. But you can always ask. You can only be told no. And keep looking. And then in the meantime, it's okay to take a job in something else to pay the bills. I had to do that. When I graduated from U of M, I could not get a job in infection prevention. I tried and tried and tried, and everybody said we need experience. And all I had was my volunteer experience and that EPID680 assistant thing. So I took a job at a filter company doing some tissue culture work and biotech work. And, it paid the bills. It was fine. It wasn't my dream job, but it got me experience in a little bit of a different area. And then I just kept at it and finally got a job in infection prevention a year and a half later. So don't despair. Just, if this is your thing, just stay focused and keep driving towards that goal. Stay motivated. Now, if you do get in the field, there are a couple of opportunities to keep advancing yourself, of course. The first one is certification in infection control. And CIC, they just offered a brand new one called an associate associate CIC. So there's 3 tiers now, really. There's the associate one, which is for brand new, like I have some new MPH IPs. They're looking at that right now, the associate certification. And then there's the regular CIC, which is 2 years in the field. And then there's a higher tier through APIC called fellowship of APIC, the fellowship. And that's after many years with research and speaking and things like that, you get your fellowship. So, and all of those you have to renew at some regular frequency. So I have a great book that I recommend to people. The book is called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And I think it's a good book because, you know, every stage of life, really, you know, work and energy you did got you to this point, right? But that's not necessarily what's going to get you to the next point, right? So everything you did in undergrad, everything you did with your experience got you to U of M School of Public Health. But now you have to do more to get to that next level, which is a job or career in your chosen field. So I like that book because it really goes through, really drills that in your head. And even me, you guys, you know, I'm like top of my profession, but I still every single day do something to continue to move myself up. Every single day I read an article. Throughout COVID, I stayed current on every single thing published. You know, so you have to like continue. You can never rest on your laurels. That is the worst thing ever to do. So continue to grow, expand your brain, your mind about that profession, because especially healthcare now, it's rapidly changing and it's constantly moving. So you have to stay in front of it or you will get plowed over. So good luck. There is my email address. There you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Make sure you find the right LinkedIn, actually, because I have an old one floating around out there. I think my background picture is actually the peonies in Ann Arbor. So you'll know you find me when you see those, the peonies. And then it's my face and my profile. Oh, you know what? I wanted to mention that to you guys about your LinkedIn. You should